Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, obviously you have been a business leader in the space for so many decades, and you really need
Well, it's very kind of you, Julia. Very kind of you.
I just want to ask you, as a seasoned deal maker yourself, going forward, what do you see as some of the greatest challenge in the M&A business?
Right now, of course, Washington is a big challenge, and it isn't clear that we have a very business-friendly situation in Washington, D.C. There are probably more problems with antitrust rules, certainly environmental rules, than historically. The whole Obamacare thing is an issue that gets involved in every deal. You know, what are the implications going to be in terms of my health insurance costs and so forth in the future? Now, offsetting that, you have a very low interest rates, primarily because of the fact that the Federal Reserve has had this quantitative easing for a considerable period of time, and so interest rates are lower than normal. Now, that's great right now because you can raise money more easily, and the rate that you pay for the money is cheap. But for the normal businessman saying, look, if I look out 3 years or 5 years, that probably means that rates are going to be much higher when I have to refinance and so forth. So it's great now, but you know, the day will come when I have to deal with this issue in a reverse kind of a way. So all of those things are very significant and so forth. We have
the stimulus could, stop. They were talking about it as we speak. It could stop as early as this month, down from
the quantitative easing.
Exactly. Do you see it's going to be an uncertain ride?
Well, I think it's almost certainly going to result in higher interest rates. Now, whether we're talking about going from 3.5% to 5% or something like that, but it'll be a very material change. I don't think we're talking about a period like we had in the late 1970s, early 1980s, where interest rates were 10% or 12%. But nonetheless, it's extraordinarily likely that they will go up.
Right, like right now, for example, 10-year Treasury is like the upper twos. Where do you see that going in 1 year?
Well, I'm not good at forecasting that particularly, but I think that it's extremely likely that rates could be 4 or 5% in a different kind of an environment, and that would be, in terms of bond prices, is huge. Going from 2 3/4 to 5% is a massive change in terms of the price that you have on securities.
I want to go back to the antitrust and Obamacare that you mentioned earlier. Which one of these policies do you think is the most detrimental to M&A activities?
The one that affects many businesses is the Obamacare. Now, there are many businesses where you have a lot of lower paid folks, say in the restaurant industry and so forth. And the implications of suddenly having to carry insurance are great. Now, it appears to me that a lot of companies are dealing with that by simply cutting hours, and everybody's under 30 hours. Just don't hire anybody over 29 hours. If you have fewer than 50 employees, you just make sure you don't go over 50 employees. I mean, maybe you hire a temp person or bring in an agency or something, but you keep yourself below 50 because you don't want to have to deal with that situation. In New York, providing insurance for an employee who's married and has children could be as much as $30,000 a year. The penalty's $2,000. Well, for most businesses, if you have a choice between $30,000 and $2,000, you say it's a very difficult choice, even if you want to be fair and reasonable to your employees. So that whole area, recently we bought another restaurant company, and that was a major area, a topic of consideration, a topic where the sellers were saying, "Oh, this isn't going to hurt you very much at all." It's and of course we're trying to make rational decisions.
What was going on, in your mind when you were going through that
well,
transaction?
It's clear that you have to have some process through which you analyze what the implications are going to be. And for
Do you put a discount on that? Like how much of a discount?
well,
do you put on that?
you have to decide how much money it's going to cost you. Maybe you don't put a discount on it, but you say rather than having this company earn, say, $30 million a year, maybe I think it's only going to be $26 or $27 million a year, because I see that there's at least $3 million worth of health care costs that are currently not in their P&L that might be in the future. So and that effectively means that you pay a lower, what appears to be a lower multiple now, but it reflects the fact that you think their earnings are going to be adversely impacted by the healthcare costs.
Right. All right. Thank you for that. I want to bring it back to the Washington topic. Is midterm election is less than 1 year away. What do you foresee happening?
Well, I'm certain that all the politicians are going to show up and solicit me for their.
Exactly. That's what I want to ask you.
There are many uncertainties, but that is certainly. It appears to me that the Republican Party is that the leadership is moving away a little bit from the Tea Party phenomena. They recognize that that is not a very effective strategic direction to go. That isn't going to work very well for the Republicans. It's totally unclear to me. I mean, my impression is that the House will continue to be Republican, and of course the Republicans are struggling to get the Senate.
Sure.
And if that were to happen, then I think there's a lot of legislation that would be passed by the House and Senate and sent to the President. And of course, the President has the right to veto legislation, but he probably can't do that for every bill that comes from the Hill. I mean, he probably has to accept some he will establish some priorities. So there could be a meaningful change of direction. They might not provide the funding for Obamacare.
And then I want to ask you, say next year, a year from now, once this whole election settles, is there anything differently that you might do then in terms of M&A as opposed to right now before the election, midterm election?
Well, I think if you had a lot of confidence in the direction of where the government was going, you might be somewhat more venturesome.
Well, are you confident? Are you?
No, I'm saying that I'm assuming that we've now gotten through the 2014.
Because Congress approval rate is at all-time low.
Right. Well, and it's pretty much been at an all-time low for quite a while. It's but nonetheless, there will probably be an election, and they will probably elect some people. They'll either probably elect the Republicans or the Democrats, and so you have Congress and you have the Senate. And depending on how those things happen, if one gains confidence that we have some sensible direction, that you may gain more confidence in the system and therefore be more venturesome in what you're prepared to do. If you feel that government is basically anti-business, and that anything that comes up, any issue, whether it's antitrust, environmental, any other regulatory thing, that they're going to be aggressive and prosecute the most adverse possible outcome. If that's the environment that you're living in, well, you say, well, maybe I'll stay in my hut and not do too much right now. Alternatively, if you think government is favorably inclined towards business and are prepared to be supportive of business and are going to help you out if you stumble, then I think you tend to be more, you'll be more aggressive.
So right now, Q4 2013, would you say the government is pro-business or not?
Oh, I think it's negative on business. I think any way that the current executive administration can make it difficult for business, they do. Now, I was just speaking with a lady who had been in the government and was talking about some of their trade programs and so forth, but I think that's overwhelmingly or is overwhelmed by all of the other things that are going on that are negative towards business.
In terms of financial regulations, current financial regulations, which piece do you think is the most damaging to the financial market?
Well, I think Dodd-Frank is very adverse. And the reason I do think that is that it applies now to the private equity industry, and it has virtually no applicability to the private equity industry. It's really designed to deal with people who are trading stocks in public markets, and so you have piles and piles of regulations and thousands of things that are doing. And in our firm, it only costs us $1 million or so a year to kind of deal with it. But I just find it's very difficult to think that it's going to have any impact, impact on.
In the long term, say 2 years out, or from now up till 2016, are you pessimistic or optimistic about M&A?
I always am trying to do transactions, always interested in doing transactions, but I think until there's a change of administration, one will be somewhat more cautious than if we had a different president.
Okay. In terms of global M&A business, what is your outlook?
Well, I believe businessmen today are more sophisticated than they've probably ever been before. The airplane and everything means that people travel all around the world. They're familiar with doing business in all kinds of different locations. A business doesn't have to be very big in the United States to perhaps be sourcing in China or someplace else in Asia. If you're a businessman, one of your strategies may be to first penetrate the U.S. market, but then you go to Europe and you go to Asia and you go to other places. And given that you can go around the world, I believe that businessmen are prepared to source their product throughout the world. They're prepared to sell their products throughout the world. I believe they're sophisticated enough nowadays to incorporate in places that might minimize their taxes. And if they get big enough to go public or to do a public bond offering or something like that, they can sit down and say, well, look, it's best to do this in the United States, or no, Singapore would be better, or the UK could be better, or they have great markets for certain kinds of industries in Norway. And
What's in Norway?
well, oil service related things and
I
shipping
see,
related things. A lot of those businesses are go public in Norway. And so, a company that I'm involved with today is sort of looking at the alternative. Should we go be public in the U.S. or in UK or Singapore? We certainly are not interested in paying unnecessary taxes.
Absolutely. You don't have to limit yourself to the United States or any country for that matter.
That's right. And I think probably if you went back 50 years ago, as a country, we were a lot more parochial. Today in the oil service industry, you have a number of substantial companies that have moved their headquarters and their operations offshore. They've gone to Switzerland, Dubai, places of that nature, and it's it's well within the realm of feasibility for them to do that. And as I say, I doubt if 50 years ago they would contemplate that.
All right, we have to wrap this, but thank you so much for your time.
Terrific.
Yeah.
It's very nice to be with you, Julia.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Super.
Yeah.